Here's everybody coming in. So welcome everybody. We're just going to give it a couple minutes while folks have a chance to get admitted from the waiting room and we start filling out the meeting, and then we'll get started.
Welcome everyone. It's so good to see some of these names, friends and colleagues coming into the room. It's great to have you guys here. This is our regional conversation for the Sacramento area, and this is being brought to you by Californians for the Arts and SARA, the Sacramento Alliance for Regional Arts, as well as the City of Sacramento Department of Cultural Arts. And there's so many different ones. Megan, what is your official?
So we are the Office of Arts and Culture, which is a division inside Convention and Cultural Services.
Thank you. Apologies.
You're welcome.
So thanks to being here and to doing that with us. And Liv and I have been meeting for a while now, working together on all things arts advocacy in the region and throughout the state. So thanks, Liv, for all your work.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here today. This is exciting.
So we've been doing these regional conversations. This is the fourth one out of 9 that we have across the state. And this is the second round of them that we've been doing. And really it's an opportunity for us to also, at Californians for the Arts and California Arts Advocates, to hear from you. We really want this to be a conversation. We want to be interactive. I want you to raise your hand or just put something in the chat and add to the conversation. There will be some presentations, but really it's meant to be more of a conversation. I can tell you that these have really informed our advocacy and the prioritization of what we're working on, as well as just understanding what's happening in the field for both arts workers, arts organizations, arts businesses, and making sure that we're representing that appropriately at the state level.
Yeah, and I think I'm excited from the perspective of the Alliance. Last year, we kind of had our marching orders laid out because everything was so chaotic. And, this year is going to be challenging too, but the landscape is going to be so different. And so, I think participating in the conversation today is going to be really useful in understanding what the evolving needs are going to be. And, as all of us are getting ready to reopen, what that's going to look like. So it's a new set of scary challenges.
And we also have Maria Costa here with us, who's not only a Californians for the Arts board member, but just an amazing Sacramento arts leader for many decades here. And the director emeritus, is that the right?
Still the director.
Still the director of the Latino Center of Arts and Culture. Welcome, Marie.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm so proud of Sacramento and Liv and the artists and all the arts community that's come together to raise our voice as Sacramentans and as regional arts producers, as cultural workers, especially during the time of the pandemic. We could have just sort of let everything go, saying, well, not much we can do now. But on the contrary, I think with Liv's leadership there in Sacramento and then around the county, we've been able to come together, and that's so important in these times. So thank you, Liv.
Yeah, I'm glad you're on our board.
I am too. Sacramento. And Megan, it's a pleasure to meet you. And as our city arts funder, there are many, many challenges ahead for, I'm sure, the department or the unit. I think it's a unit, if I'm not mistaken. But I've been convinced that we at some point are going to have our own department with lots and lots of money to give to the arts. So it's good to partner with you towards that goal, and I believe it's a can-do item to put out there.
I'm very excited to be here. I just think everybody I've met since I've been here in September, and again, it's a fraction so far of this entire scene, has just been fantastic, and I'm really delighted to help serve it.
Awesome. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started in the interest of time at 4:05. So if we can get the next slide up, we'll give you a sense of the agenda. And one of the things we wanted to start off with is we're really sad to share that, the arts and culture sector has lost a real warrior for the arts, and that is Larry Baza, who hails from San Diego, but really is statewide, had been the chair of the California Arts Council, just recently appointed to that position as chair, had been on the council. This was his second term. He was appointed by Senator Pro Tem Tony Atkins. And sadly, Larry passed away from COVID. And so he'll be sorely missed. And we dedicate our advocacy this year to his legacy. So please pause for a moment in that, and we'll go to the next slide. So to give you an idea of what we're going to do, just real quick in terms of rules of engagement, I don't even like that word rules. There are no rules. We'll throw the rules out. But if you could just, if you want to introduce yourself in the chat, acknowledge the Indigenous land in which you reside in the chat. And if you're not sure where that is, I think we have a tool where you can look that up. Although if you're all, we're not in the same places. Be respectful and courteous to your fellow advocates. Be mindful of your own input. No long speeches. I'm usually that one. That's my problem. So you can shut me up at any time. Oop. And mute your audio when you're not speaking, and use the raise hand function if you'd like to speak or put questions in the chat. So those are kind of gives you an idea of some of it, but mostly, like I said, we really want to have a conversation with you. So thanks for starting to do that in the chat, if you would. And if we go back to the agenda real quick, we'll just take a look at that, and everyone will get a sense of what we're up to. And we're really excited because Councilmember Guerra is coming in today, and he'll be talking as well a little about his priorities, policy priorities, and where the arts fit into that as well. So we'll get started. I'm going to give, if everyone's okay with me getting started here, I'll give pretty much just a bit of a update on what's happening at the state. Hi, everyone. Now we can see each other. Hello, Sacramento. Nice to see all of you. I'm going to just, if it's okay, I'm going to share my screen. You're going to go back into that mode for a second there, and then I'll give you an update on all the fabulous things that are happening at the state level. And I'm going to try and do this fast. I have till 4:20. So I'm sure you're not unfamiliar with the fact that the arts and entertainment industry has suffered devastating losses since last year, March of last year. This is actually gives you an idea of the impact just here in California. Is a really great Brookings Institute study, and that's about 2/3 of the sector's jobs have been lost. And what's also important, and the reason why we utilize these data points is really to build our case making with legislators to say we have been disproportionately impacted by the shutdowns, first to close, last to reopen, as the saying goes. And we have actually the largest percentage of job loss than any other sector as well. And that's also really critical importance. We like to say that we put the art in restart, and that's because a lot of what we need to be talking about right now is how do we get back to work? How can we be seen as part of California's recovery? And given that that legitimacy. Some of the pieces that we've been working on in terms of how we've been building the messaging framework, and Marie was one of our panelists at an assembly hearing, which was now maybe several weeks ago. Time blurs. It was called Reopening Arts Safely. It was held by Sharon Cork Silva, who's now the chair of the Assembly Committee on Arts. She hails from Orange County. And that was a really important hearing for us to actually have a voice, for them to actually hear from us about what is going on in terms of the impact. And a lot of it was also around the fact that we don't have any reopening guidelines for the performing arts sector. We're not even on the blueprint for a safer economy recovery. The red tier, blue tier, red tier, orange tier, et cetera. And so that's something that we're going to be focused on. But there has been a recent win that we do want to celebrate, which is, hopefully you heard, yesterday the governor signed a $7.6 billion COVID relief package. Included in that is over $2 billion in small business grants, and included inside that $2 billion is a separate application process that will be developed specifically for nonprofit cultural institutions for $50 million. We are the only industry that was called out in that small business bunch of funds. And that's really important because, again, it means that they're hearing from us, that they're recognizing that there has been disproportionate impact to our sector. In addition, we were able, through direct lobbying, to get the cap on the budget size for organizations lifted. Typically for the small business grant program, it's been $2.5 million. For this $50 million pot, it'll be any size budget is able to apply for this grant. It still is a max of $25,000. We will be actually one of the community partners for this program with Lendistry. So we will be tapped to help you through the process. We won't be able to read the grants, so we won't be able to decide who gets the money, but we certainly will help to be getting the information out about it. Also important parts of advocacy, and those of you who do this work know how important media coverage is creating and building awareness around what's happening for your sector. There's been a lot of media coverage about the arts. It's really, I would say, one of the sort of silver linings and exciting things is I really do feel like we are more a part of the conversation than we've ever been before. And you're hearing about the arts in major media and in social media, in newspapers, radio, TV, and so on. And there's been a lot of really great grassroots campaigns that have grown this last year. Be an Arts Hero, National Independent Venues Association, NEVA, and we are building coalition with all of those here in California as well. The other thing we wanted to mention is that tomorrow we're actually launching our impact survey, which will be with the Otis report on the creative economy. And that will, again, what has been the impact for particularly in workers, which has been a focus of what we were doing, and which really wasn't the focus on the Otis report. So that will be launched tomorrow.
Julie, real quick, we had a question in the chat in regards to that 50 million budget announcement. Is that differentiating between what just went through the small business loan as the second round of the small business funding? It is different.
It is different. It has not yet been launched yet. And when it does launch, it'll be the only one that will launch at that time. So you can apply for the 50 million. And if you don't get it, you will know by the time that the third tranche of funding for the small business relief grants program will launch. So in other words, it's good because we're able to say, you can apply for this. Hopefully you're in that $50 million bucket because it's going to be specific to cultural institutions. But if you don't get it for some reason, if it's oversubscribed, you can still get into the larger pool. And again, we'll have more information on this as it gets released. It just got signed by the governor yesterday. We did have a meeting with Lendistry today, but we're just starting in the process. One of the other things, so reopening guidelines are really important, I think, for those of us in the performing arts and live events industry aspect of the arts. And we are operating currently without any guidelines from the state, except for a very generic statement that says in minimal and moderate tiers, you can do 100 people outside and 50 people outside, and you can work with your local public health agency to get approval of guidelines. Well, number one, who's got the capacity to do one-off guidelines for every event? That's not equitable, and it's also not safe. And so we also know that we can reopen arts safely. There have been tons of studies along those lines. And so right now, Assemblymember Nazarian is working on a member letter, which is a just letter that they distribute throughout the Capitol building, that they then get lots of signatures and they bring it up to the governor and say, please, can you get these guidelines going? And again, just a really important point on the guidelines is not that we're asking to reopen today. Nobody wants to do it when it's not safe to do so, but we want to be on the roadmap. We want to understand when can we reopen and what's going to be required of us. If we don't know that, we cannot plan, and we can't understand also what it's going to cost. Quickly, also, we wanted to let you know that a budget letter has been introduced for $1 for the arts, which is another exciting development that came out of the hearing. When they heard where we stood in terms of arts funding, we're 73 cents per capita per state of California, and we're about ranked 23rd in the United States for funding for the arts. There were a number of legislators who were pretty much appalled by that. And even though this is not new news, I can tell you that it's so important to remind people of what they may not remember. So out of that, we've introduced a budget letter for $1 for the arts, which would take it from $26 million to $40 million for the state arts agencies for the California Arts Council. It's only got introduced on Friday. It's at the beginning of the process. The budget gets decided by June. So you'll be hearing more from us in terms of advocacy and getting your help to really push that forward. The other exciting thing is a California Creative Core. These are jobs creation strategies along the idea, concepts around the WPA and CETA programs. The governor actually introduced $15 million for the California Core pilot program in January. There was $5 million in early action. It doesn't look like that necessarily has gone, it certainly hasn't gone through yet. We're not sure it will, but we're hoping to roll in that 5 and put it all into the 21-22 budget. Same cycle as what we just talked about in June. And then we also just are authoring, we're sponsoring, and Senator Ben Allen is authoring legislation on the California Creative Core, Senate Bill 628. I was just on a call on that. It's really exciting news that we're going to start to really socialize language around that artists are essential workers, artists are workforce, and artists should be used in service to so many other things that we know are problems throughout our state, and how can we prioritize artists as being a part of the solution. Again, through sort of a model of training and jobs creation for artists in particular. And Maria Costa has done an amazing job here in Sacramento with the Sacramento Artist Corps, which has a definite focus on that. So she'll be sharing that in a minute. We also, once we have an idea of what the reopening guidelines are going to look like, we're probably going to need funding to actually reopen the arts in terms of capital improvements and other things that we might be needing. Testing for artists and performers is expensive when you have to do COVID testing on a regular basis, those sorts of things. As we know, there's a $1.9 trillion package currently being debated at the federal level. There's a number of items in that for the arts and culture sector, including increased funding for some of the agencies like the NEA, NEH, and IMLS, which is Museum and Library Services. In addition, there's state monies in there, which many of you in Sacramento did such an excellent job in accessing through CARES Act funding this last time. We're hoping that that will come again to the states, and we're not sure if it's going to come in the same format and criteria. Those are all the things that are being debated and looked at. And of course, as you guys know, in terms of the second round, that, this Shutter Venues Operators Grant is still not released the guidelines, which has been really challenging. And it's sitting in SBA and working on that. And they send out FAQs, and then one day it says it's based on earned revenue, and the next day they take the word earned out. And when they take the word earned out, that really affects nonprofits. So there's a lot of stuff going on there that we're trying to decipher and translate. Ongoing advocacy priorities include some of the things that we've really seen as the outcome of COVID and to our sector has been that our workforce are one of the most vulnerable workforces out there. Artists do not have social safety net programs. Artists do not have unemployment systems that really make sense to the way that artists work, which is typically being self-employed. So we really need to look at what is the infrastructure and how do we build systems to support living wage, housing, food security, and mental health for artists. We're also finding in our own survey that was one of the things that artists themselves are suffering from right now. Part of that is also the gap. When you don't see yourself in a future, it's pretty difficult to feel good about what your place is in that work, and that's challenging. In addition to the fact that they don't have work. We also know that we need to radically reimagine our business models, hiring practices, board recruitment, policies, resources, and programs centered in racial and cultural equity. I think that after the murder of George Floyd, it was very clear within the arts sector, we are not immune to having racism within our organizations, within our sector, and I think that it's been highlighted, and I think we all know how much we need to commit to first racial equity, and what our organization has come to the determination is that we cannot get to cultural equity without racial equity first. And so everything in terms of how arts funding needs to be distributed has to be looked at through not a lens, but a practice. of racial equity. And then we're also looking at things like new program delivery models and technical training and support. In other words, so many of you have pivoted to going online with your services. Do you have the skill set? Do you have the infrastructure for that? Is that the long-term strategy for how you're going to do business, and so on? Because there's some silver linings there. People have seen broader audiences because of that, but maybe that's not something that you were planning for in the beginning when you released your business model. And then, as many of you know, that we've been working on AB 5, and there are two bills actually out right now, Senate Bill 805 and Assembly Bill 1227. And those are what we know in terms of what's coming up, and those are specific to the performing arts sector and potential exemptions. We'll be tracking that and working on that, and we'll keep you guys informed. I understand Councilmember Guerra is here, so I'm going to cut to the chase, which is how can we help you? We've got some things coming up in March that we want to make sure that if you're someone who's newer to advocacy, that we give you the tools to be able to engage in advocacy. That's on March 12th. We also host Arts, Culture, and Creativity Month during the month of April, a time to celebrate and uplift the arts and culture sector here in California, as well as talk about specific things that we need to pass in terms of policy in order for our sector to be sustainable and for us to protect arts workers. So we hope you'll engage with us on that, March 26th. And we really, really want to hear from you. I know I've just been talking a lot. That's part of the deal with my job is to be out there and talking, but I want to stop talking and I want to really be listening. So we look forward to more conversation around some of these, but I want to stop sharing now and welcome Councilmember Guerra here. There he is. I see you. Thank you. Hi, Julie. And I know I want to have Marie. Marie, do you want to introduce your guest? Oh, unmute, please.
I am so honored to have join us the Honorable Council Member Eric Guerra. I've known Eric from, I think, 2005, Eric, when you were working at the Capitol as a member of the staff for the state legislature. And I always knew this man is going far. Dog. He is going far. And I'm just so delighted to have been along with him for his ride into the foray of politics and serving community and serving all of us here in Sacramento. And I know he has some exciting news that I'm not going to break. I'll let him break. But I also want to say that it is because of Eric's real emphasis on the arts that the Sacramento Artist Corps was able to pay as many artists as we did, as much as they got for over 2 months to help them in the unemployed and underemployed situation that they were finding themselves in, that we were finding ourselves in. So I want to say hello, Eric. We're honored to have you, and thank you for all you do for the arts. Is Eric there?
I'm on mute there. There we go. Sorry. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Maria. Appreciate that. And I'm excited to be here. I'm, obviously a big advocate for the arts. And one of the things that I found early on in a better understanding the arts was my time at Sac State when, then Mayor Joe Cerna was still here, and in Paz Descanse. And also we had folks like Jose Montoya, Professor Jose Montoya, and Professor Favela. And I remember them, so active on campus and using art in a different way to not just for art's sake, but to convey story and to convey passion and convey purpose. And so how fitting that, I'm using the wide open walls as my background. I love it. And it's from Sac State. That's the theater building at Sac State. And, and so what I will say is that I feel like COVID and 19 and working with Marie really kind of made me rethink and bring that memory back because a couple things. One, we saw so many of our artists that were immediately, let go, lost their income. This was their way of sustaining themselves. And the shutdown, man, it really hurt a lot of them and no other avenue. And in fact, I remember meeting with a young graduate from West Campus High School whose parents were performing artists. Very tragic story that shortly after the pandemic, they didn't have any gigs, any work, and so maybe they shouldn't have, but they were in a position where they had no income, started doing these underground performances, and unfortunately picked up COVID. The whole family ended up getting COVID, and we had a poor awareness about how COVID spread so quickly, and it was more than just a flu or a cold or something of that nature. And sadly, this young student, was also prepping it for a pre-medical degree and was learning about it and wanted to get into that field, and was the one who had to translate for her family from the doctors that her dad was going to pass away from COVID, that they were performing artists and they picked up that while they were performing, and that now they are all infected and that they need to understand the issue. And her message to me was there wasn't a way to convey that message to us in a way we were understanding. And if you live in a middle class community where you get 4 outlets of TV and news, the Capital Public Radio, KFBK, Channel 3, Channel 40, and the Sacramento Bee, then you're probably being bombarded by a lot of those issues. And so it affected people differently. But one thing that I know in the Latino community and many communities is that art has always played a special role in communicating. And that I think was an important touchstone that Marie and I were starting to talk about. How do we better engage? How do we better get more outlet in that information, and employing artists to be our communicators? That I think is something that we need to take on in the future. How do we look at this at the statewide level, rather than just the standard propaganda that the government sometimes puts out, right? We do it for legal purposes, got to be in the box. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be looking at other ways that we can better connect with our communities. And in this era of, identifying and getting right at the issue of racial equity and making sure we're moving in that form, we need to start thinking about how art plays a form in that, how art helps us, feel these issues a little better. So I'll stop there and say that to me, the effort here was a combination effort of figuring out how do we look at employment opportunities, workforce opportunities for our artists, but also how do we make sure that it's interlinked with the other needs that we have right now in our society, and how to tell the story. And after we get through this dark area of the pandemic, how do we make sure that we don't forget it? How do we make sure that our artists are telling these stories in their different mediums in the future, so that our young kids, my son's 3 years old. He may or may not remember. He just might remember that, there was a weird time where for 6 months I didn't play with any kids. I wonder why, but we want him to actually feel that. Art allows you to feel that. So I'll stop there, see if there's any questions. Thank you for this opportunity to be here. Because I am talking about city stuff, Marie, if you want to make the announcement, that's fine, but I'll stick to my city work here today.
I'll do it, gladly do it. As we were talking about advocacy and the importance of having people in the state legislature who understand, support, and love the arts and see its value, I'm very proud to announce that Eric is running for state senate. And I hope that as many of us as possible will read his bio and see that Eric is going to be a champion of ours in the Senate, and he is exactly the person we need to get in there and make sure that our voices are heard. He has done that for us in Sacramento, and I am so looking forward to him doing this in the State Senate of California. Thank you, Eric.
Thanks,
Eric.
Marie. Thank you, Julie.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say we can't wait to get you in the state Senate so you can help us get the California Creative Corps through the legislature, which we now have as a Senate Bill 628. So please check it out. It is an extension of what you have supported here in Sacramento and bringing it exactly what you just described to the state level. As an ongoing program, so that we have jobs creation for artists, so that we recognize artists as vital communicators and storytellers, as well as people who are an important workforce for the state of California, and should be given contracts, not just grants.
I agree with that. Yes, let's I think we should think about public relations firms as the old way of doing things. We need to think about, community relations as it links with us together. So great point of that.
Excellent. So glad. Thank you so much for joining us. And we want to invite other people while you have the council member here, please ask your questions of him as well. Is there anybody who has a question for the council member? Anything you want to share in terms of maybe CARES Act funding that you utilized and sharing success stories? Because we're hoping that there'll be more funding like that coming again from the feds. And so you want to make sure that you're showing that measurable impact that came from that CARES Act funding, so we can make sure that that continues both for your department and for all the grantees. Marie has her hand up.
Yes, I haven't asked you this, Eric. Are you aware of any monies that will be coming through the city to assist artists in the fashion we've been able to with the Artist Corps?
Yeah, so one of the things I want us to make sure we start thinking about this is that artists are businesses. They're not just artists. And I think even now more than ever, we have to tell that story a little better, right? That's their pace of employment. Other people provide a good. This is a good as well. I know sometimes we hate talking about it in that context, but it is a good. And the governor recently signed his state stimulus package that's going to come down to help small businesses. I think thinking about how do artists position themselves for this large stimulus package, and I'm trying to think of it was like $360 million, but that
So
may have
there's
come down.
$2 billion in small business grants, and 50 million of it is going to go specifically to arts and nonprofit arts and culture.
There we go. That's the numbers. I mean, there's so many numbers being thrown at us as well. So I think for one aspect, that's a big piece. And then how we as a city help educate about that effort. The other thing is a lot of our artists are in the low income category too. So we want to make sure that they're eligible for all the rental assistance programs that we have, and also the earned income tax credit that's available. And some of our artists in Sacramento are immigrants and refugees, which is a great addition to our pieces. Guess what? They are eligible for this earned income tax credit up to $600 per unit of the family. So I know we're going to want to make sure that we do that outreach as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Eric. And hopefully, like I said, we'll get some more Fed dollars into cities in the next $1.9 trillion package from the feds. And hopefully your great work that you guys all did, you can access more funding at your city level as well for the arts. Anybody have any other comments, or Eric, is anything you want to add?
Well, I'll just say I'm going to drop my email here, my city email in the chat. City of Sacramento.org. Always feel free to reach out. I'll do my my Facebook also handle here. What do they say? At Eric Z Guerra. The Z for folks know is my kind of like the name Juan Carlos. It's Eric Seferino, but Eric stuck when we came to the United States. But my father was a Seferino. My grandfather was a Seferino. We kind of changed it up with Javier this time around. So and so that handle is there too. But one thing that I not only take questions, but I'm fine taking also comments, gripes, and complaints. I mean, that all helps us too. So if you don't have a question, sometimes you have a point of view, please share those. And then I'll send the Instagram last here. And then I'll let you guys to a busy agenda as well. But so with that,
Eric, in your last minute, what is your best advice you can give to people in terms of making sure that their voices are heard for arts advocacy in the city?
Contact your council member. I can't tell you how much politics is local. I mean, there are so many friends that I know, and then they tell me about an issue, and I'm like, you never called me, and you didn't call your council member. Like, really, we're just accessible. We're neighbors, and I think that's probably even for a city of Sacramento that's over 500,000 people. Council members, we're just neighbors. We live in the neighborhood, and we just want to do things. So call your council member. Don't take it as anything like formal or you're calling this elected official. And that I would say is your best way of helping people. So thanks.
Thank you so much for that advice. It's so important to demystify what it is to connect with your elected officials. And thank you for being so real. And that is the truth. You're just everyone, you know, electeds are your neighbors. And so thanks for being there and being a problem solver.
I agree and appreciate it. Yeah, if I took the screen off, you'd see the pile of kids' clothes I got to fold over here. So, you know, like,
You better get
it's
to
like
work.
everybody else.
Yeah, we did an advocacy day, and it was the very beginning of the pandemic, and Senator Ben Allen from Santa Monica was in a bedroom, and he had an unmade bed behind him, and I called him out on it because I was just like, look, they're just like us. They have unmade beds. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being here. We want to now switch to the local presentations, and you are welcome to stay with us as much as you'd like to hear the conversation as well.
I'm actually, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna step off and do daddy duty now too. So if not,
Okay.
you know, we're handing off. She's on a Zoom call, so then I jump off here. So
Totally get it. Totally get it.
bye,
Thank you
everybody.
so
Have a
much.
good one.
So I'm going to hand it over to Liv, and you guys are going to go ahead with sort of what's happening on the local advocacy front and arts and culture.
Yeah, thanks. So for anybody who's not familiar, in case there's people on the call that aren't aware of what the Sacramento Alliance for Regional Art is, and also I guess just to introduce myself in case there's someone on the call that doesn't know me. My name is Liv Moe, and I'm the founding director of Verge Center for the Arts, and I'm also the board president for the Sacramento Alliance for Regional Art. And last spring, pretty late spring, early summer, there was a group of us who got together and founded the Alliance for Regional Art because we recognized that we needed to do a better job of telling our story. And early on in the pandemic, there were a couple things happening. One, some of the early funding sources that were becoming available seemed to be directed to businesses, specifically for-profit businesses. So we were really having a hard time making the case that, you know, we deserved funding as well. And we were also payroll providers and employers. And then there was also a division happening between advocacy for individual artists and creators and advocacy for creative workers and creative laborers and organizations. So we really recognized this need to knit the community together so that we could share resources with one another and also advocate on our own behalf for what it is that we need. So initially last year, everything was just very chaotic. The agenda was set for us based on just reacting to the opportunities that were coming up and the things that were happening. Everything was just super fast. And now as we're moving into 2021, we're starting to look at a series of conversations and convenings. We're really happy that we were able to be part of this today. And moving into the rest of the year, we're going to start working on having monthly get-togethers, virtually initially, of course. The next one will be at the end of March. So I'm going to put it in the chat, but if you go to artsforsac.org, you can sign up for our mailing list. And that's also a place that we put any convenings and things like that up. And in March, we're going to start talking about future advocacy efforts through the rest of the year, and also getting more information from all of the regional artists and organizations we work with in terms of what concerns are facing some of you, so that we can tell a story beyond just always advocating for money, because obviously we need to do that, but we'd also like to be able to partner with some of our regional policymakers around things like affordable housing and other issues that we have shared commonality on, so that it doesn't just seem like we're always beating the same drum, even though obviously we all do need funding. And then just a couple other things. Currently membership in SARA is free. So if you go on the website, you can also sign up as an organizational or individual member. And we are bringing together for-profit and nonprofit arts interests. So I saw Julia Heath on the call earlier from the Venue Coalition. We did some work with them around a sustainability project that was funded through the CARES Act at the end of last year. You know, obviously, regional venues are not necessarily nonprofits, but we see the need to support creative workers in all forms. So I really hope that you'll take a minute and sign up and start joining us on those conversations so that we can continue to keep the regional community knitted together as we move through this next year.
That's terrific, Liv, and great work. And it's Marie has her hand up.
I just want to underscore what Liv said. I've been doing advocacy in the arts for more years than I can count. And to see that there are how many people on this in this meeting? 40, how many? 40 something. That is a tremendous number of people to any elected official. If you can go to an elected official and say, I've got 49 people behind me, that elected official says, 49 people, there's 10 people behind each of those 49. That's a lot of votes. That could make or break a politician. We have strength. The arts have strength. We have strength if we're unified. And I'm just really so happy to see so many people on this because it means we have power.
I love that. That's a great segue. Oh, Liv, you guys don't have to. You don't have to
Sorry.
raise your hands. You can just speak.
I know. So Marie reminded me that something I forgot to mention. So we've engaged in several advocacy efforts since this whole thing started. And what Eric mentioned earlier was so on point in terms of letting your policymakers and your elected officials in your region know that something matters to you. Because one of the things that we're finding is that in a lot of instances, it's just whatever is getting communicated the most. So if, they never hear from the arts sector, then they're going to assume that we're not as substantial as other things that they need to bail out. And so, or to consider. And so I really do think that, if you're feeling frustrated about how things are developing around the arts in your communities, letting whoever your representatives know that that matters to you makes a huge difference.
It's so true. And I always say that if they don't know there's a problem, they're not going to solve it, right? So that's what legislators try to do. They just try, what their job is, to solve problems. And so we have to let them know when there are problems, or what we can do to help be part of the solution, which is, I think, another key messaging framework, which is a great segue to Maria Costa sharing what she's been doing with the Sacramento Artist Corps, which is really very much an inspiration for the California Creative Corps, which we hope will get through the legislature this year. So Marie, did you, Matt, do you want to make her a host so she can try and share?
Yeah, I'll do that. And while I do that, I was just wondering, there was a question for Liv before we go to Marie, just about your region. We have Stacy curious about how she can connect. She's in San Joaquin County, and kind of where your region ends and starts, and is there inroads to connect beyond those counties?
That is a really good question. So actually, there's several of our board members on this call today too, which is cool. But so we haven't gotten into San Joaquin County yet. In large part because we only started about 8 or 9 months ago now. But it's not necessarily something, as we're looking at the different counties that we're reaching into, it's something that we would definitely be interested in. So I'll put my email address in the chat. And if you want to reach out to me directly, I would love to talk.
Thank you. And Marie, you should be able to share now.
Okay, I'm going to try this. Wish me luck. Of course, it's not there. Never mind, it's just not going to work. I'm so sorry, folks. I was trying. Let me see if I can do this again. Is that sharing? No. What I wanted to do was put up the Latino Center of Art and Culture's link to the Sacramento Artist Corps. So I'm just going to have to let people know, if you go to the Latino Center of Art and Culture, or the latinocenter.org, there's a link right on the top that says Sacramento Artist Corps. That has all of the work that the 40 artists we funded have. It's visual arts, it's music, it's theater, storytelling. There's a great coloring book if you want to download a coloring book. When we first started the Artist Corps, and I'm not sure how many of you have heard about the Artist Corps, so I'm just going to give a quick background. When the CARES money became available, we'd had already, 3 months of a horrific drop in the ability for artists to pay their rent, to get food, to pay for their health insurance. And the CARES money became available. And of course, the WPA, since that's been something in the back of my mind of how artists contribute to community, popped up. So with a lot of help, Eric helping to shape the vision behind the Sacramento Artist Corps, we were able to get funds to pay 40 artists from $500 to $7,500 a piece for about 2 months of work to create messages for communities about how to stay safe around COVID-19. And like I said, initially it was to fund unemployed and underemployed artists who were desperate. And then hooking it into providing these messages in different languages to the most vulnerable communities it just worked, particularly with a lot of the artists that we work with. So I'm seeing now that this is such an important strategy for us now in the arts to serve as cultural messengers, to demonstrate to the public, demonstrate to elected officials this other aspect of our value as artists. And that is in the time of a pandemic, to show that we step up and we work and support and provide a very special value to the arts. Now, it's true, whatever we did, whatever song was out there, whatever posters there, is not going to change people's behavior because they see a poster or they hear a song. But it's like the anti-smoking campaign. Every message about washing your hands, wearing a mask, staying safe, keeping distance, all of those messages combined help people to change behavior. And we have, the feedback we're getting from our public is that, yes, oh, look at this, it's a coloring book, a different way that I can talk to my child about wearing a mask or washing their hands. So it's just been a fantastic experience to go through. And as a result, our project was presented to a committee that was out of the governor's office, Julie, correct me if I'm wrong, that used our model as the model for the California Creative Corps. And in March, I believe March 31st, I've been asked to serve on a national webinar with, I think, 3 other organizations from around the state that have done something similar. But we're not a lot of organizations who've done this. And I have been sharing our proposal and our budget and the work with anyone who asks for it. If you want our budget and our proposal, you want to replicate an artist corps in your organization, in your county, in your city, in your town, I'm happy to share it, because it is to all of our best interest. It's into the best interest of our community and our organizations and our artists to get money in their pockets, to help them feed their families, and to get us through the pandemic.
Marie,
so, yes.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I just want, what we've been doing at the state level has also been at the same time since last April, working on trying to get a jobs creation program for artists along the lines of, like I said, WPA and CETA. And then Marie sort of concurrently was doing it on the city level with those CARES Act monies, and really demonstrating direct impact. And one of the things I think is really important that I always want to share with everyone in terms of our case making is, please, as much as possible, try to measure your results. In other words, how many people got employed? What was the direct economic impact? But what was the direct social impact of your work? How many people did you touch in terms of the services you provided? And what kind of anecdotal stories can you also include that show that potential behavior change or whatever else it may be? The idea of the core pilot program is very similar to what Marie is talking about in terms of in service to public health and messaging, like Eric was talking about. But the idea of the California Creative Corps, which is the larger legislation picture, is not just a short segment into public health. It's into every aspect of what government is trying to solve in terms of problems, whether that's homelessness, whether that's climate change, whether that's infrastructure and transportation, whether that's mental health. We can find ourselves in all of those buckets instead of always siloing the arts in one separate area. And that's part of what's been really challenging, I think, for our sector to actually see an increase in dollars to the level that we need, is because we've been so separated. So this is sort of the overall strategy that we've been working towards, and utilizing examples like Marie's and others that we've also found. Marie?
I wanted to say one last thing. The other thing we discovered is these 40 artists, most of them didn't know each other. So what's the outcome of this is that now they've got this like cohort, they've got this group of people that they call now all the time. Amy Kelly from B Street calls Dinora Klingler, who's one of our, she was organizing the Mariachi Festival, and they're now collaborating. And that's happening a lot with the artists who are in the artist course. So we've got this whole group of people now who know one another. They're the artists that we can call on, and they can say, yeah, I'll do that, I'll do this, or we know who out there is suffering the most. We had one of our artists who was actually homeless, and sleeping in her car when we discovered her and said, hey, you want to work in the Artist Corps. So the Artist Corps has served a really important need for our artists at this time.
Absolutely. One of the things that we try to explain to legislators, because they always want to, they often want to say, well, we need to focus on things like food insecurity and homelessness and all of that. And that's not to say that we shouldn't, but we also try to explain that that is our workforce. That is who we are talking about often when we're talking about the arts. Megan, I want to introduce you to the conversation, and if you could give us an update on, I know you're relatively new to everything that's going on in the city of Sacramento, but certainly not to arts and culture and working with inside of government and advocacy. So if you want to introduce yourself a little bit as well for those who may not know you yet, and then also what's happening at the city would be great.
Yeah, happy to pitch in here. And as I said before, just so delighted to be here. It's a crazy time to have moved across the country to in the middle of a pandemic and a crisis facing the people we serve of proportions that probably this generation, has never seen. And so I'm very humble. I appreciate everything that all of you are doing, and just know that I came from the advocacy side, and I fundamentally believe in everything that you're doing. And in fact, that's where a lot of my work has really been centered. So I know that I have not met a fraction of the people that I need to meet and to speak with in the creative sector in Sacramento. And I'm just going to be fully transparent about that. But admittedly, I've been spending a lot of time inside the city, inside our division, inside just getting to know everybody so that I can be better positioned to solve some of the challenges that you're facing. This is 5 months actually that I've been in Sacramento today. And I've spent a lot of time really looking at the work that you all did, the ways in which the community contributed to crafting the Creative Edge plan. I mean, that is a core part of my job description, is moving that work forward. Also recognizing fully that there are people that did not feel that their voice is represented in that plan. And so that, it's really important for me to make sure that voices that didn't feel represented as a part of that certainly are represented in the work that we're doing as we're shaping it moving forward. So I'm super sensitive to that. And so really thinking about with us, with SMAC, dissolving in the way that it did, and now being reimagined as a division inside the city in partnership, working very closely with economic development. What is our role going to be moving forward relative to the plan? So spent a lot of time in early conversations, really thinking that through. And I did make a presentation on February 1st to the Arts, Culture, and Creative Economy Commission. So if you're interested, I encourage you to kind of take a look at that. It's it's about a 20-minute conversation. But I thought a good one, and really shaping our work into 5 core areas. One, information. I mean, it is just not lost on me. Everything that's being said right now, telling our story, is tops on helping people understand how we're intersecting with their work. And I've spent a ton of time doing that cross-sector. I'm building relationships with workforce development. I'm building relationships with people that are working on the racial equity inside of the city. So all of that stuff is happening. And there's a lot of work, I have to be honest, that team members were already doing in our division. I want to acknowledge that critical and important work was happening. So really, information is a key piece of the puzzle. Investment will continue to be a key piece of the puzzle, but also thinking strategically about what that looks like. What are the vehicles that we're using to do that? How are we looking at space? Coordination, inside of government, between governments, out with philanthropy, out with the creative sector, all of that a big part of what we do. And just workforce development, professional development of our field. So we think that those are big areas, big roles that we can fill in, and that becomes our framing device for how we move forward the goals of the plan. So if we're clear about what we're going to do, then it also makes clear what we're not going to do, and then other people can step up as well in the work to move things forward. So it's been an exciting period, and there's a lot of work to do. And I came right in at a time when we were leading into budget prep and learning about, there's so much that's been going on. So I was a lot of work on the front end, talking to folks. Then I had to turn inward, and then soon I'm going to be able to turn back outward again and start talking to folks. But it's not lost on me the idea that if we want to have a future, if we want to exercise that future, that means that the stability of the people that we're serving today is critically important. So COVID response is something that's certainly important to us. clearly the most significant investments that we made were really around, the distribution of CARES dollars. But what does that look like now? That got us so far, got us to December. That does not mean that this crisis is over. And we know we're dealing with this until, who knows when we're going to be able to reopen, to be honest. So September at least. What does that look like? How are we going to get through? There are federal dollars. We're tracking the shuttered venue operators grants. And as soon as we know more about that, we'll certainly be able to share it. But I would be remiss if I didn't say that they've made changes to the Paycheck Protection Program, and it's going to be more accessible to sole proprietors and independent contractors. And we got to make sure that people have the information they need so that they can apply for those programs. But I think local research for us and aggregation of the data that you've already given us, the things that we know, is really top of mind for me right now, so that I can help people understand and even elevate. I was just in a conversation today where it was very clear to me that they were talking about restaurants and they were talking about sports, and the arts, creative economy wasn't a part of the conversation. And I just thought, wow, we need to do more. We need to do more to elevate that. And one of our chief roles is just aggregating the information that we know about you, the important work that you're doing, the issues that you're facing, what's at stake, what's needed. All of that's coming. So we're going to put a survey into the field soon just to get some information from you looking forward, and help us augment the stuff that you've already given us. And I will say, it's really important to me, don't ask for data if you're not going to use it. We have all of those data arts profiles, and I'm going to tell you, I was on the phone with them today, and we're going to aggregate that information and use it for case making. So much more to share. I would just also say that the city is just getting ready to open a rental assistance application period, and that opens tomorrow. It'll be through March 19th. We need to get that out to folks in the creative community to make sure that they're taking advantage, because they probably will fit that bill. So I want to reinforce what Councilmember Guerra said on that front. And also just a couple of other things that are going on. The city is engaging in an effort on fee and fine reform. So they're meeting every week. And a lot of times when we think about fee and fine reform from a racial equity perspective, we're thinking about it from a justice reform perspective. But I've had conversations with Lynette Hall, and fees in a variety of different vehicles actually affect us. And so we're trying to expand that and help bring awareness to that. So I've got information, we'll be sharing more information about that. I hope the creative community will get involved and share their voice about how fees and fines are actually affecting their ability to operate within the city of Sacramento. And then also not next week, but on March 8th is our next Arts, Culture, and Creative Economy Commission. And I do see one of our commissioners on with us today, Donnie Boonstock. I see you're in my left hand screen. But I have asked folks from planning to come and talk about the housing element. This is a major part of the general plan. It's going to affect how a housing development goes in the city for a while. And housing is a big priority. It was a big priority in the Creative Edge plan. And we need to make sure that our voice, or you need to make sure that your voice is heard. I'm certainly doing the work on the inside, but it would be helpful to have some support from all of you on the outside to be a part of that discussion. So I hope that just gives you a little bit of the flavor for just the ways in which we've been working. I'm telling you, working nonstop out here on your behalf to make sure that you get what you need. But I'm always open, if you want to, set time to chat, feel free to reach out, just shoot me an email and we'll make sure to make that happen. Again, delighted to be here. So much work to do, lots of work ahead. I feel pretty excited about the whole thing now.
That's awesome, Megan. Megan and I have met a couple of times. It's great to have you here in California. She comes with so many high star recommendations from people in the field saying you guys lucked out in Sacramento to get her here. So sounds like you're doing some really critical work. And Donnie, I see your hand up, so I want to invite you into the conversation.
Thank you. I just want to underscore something that I believe you said, Julie, a little bit earlier about data. When we were reviewing all of the CARES applications on the commission, it was amazing how little data there was about who was being served and with what. And I cannot tell you enough how important it is to collect that data. Who did you help? Where were they? What was their ethnicity? What kind of help did you provide? And who do you serve? The data about the economic impact of the arts we try to collect, and it's a little bit apples and oranges, but not only how many tickets did you sell or how many visits did you have to your gallery, but that multiplier effect of what dinners were bought and how much parking there was, and did they rent a hotel room? What zip codes are people coming from? That kind of data is really, really helpful, both in grant applications and for those of us who are advocating, because we can then make the case that the arts are more than a black hole in the community into which people chuck money. I don't mean to be a champion of the obvious, but I just
No, I think it's such an important reminder. And I always talk about, like I said, measurable impacts, because I think we do great work, and then we have to be able to say what that work actually, what change did it affect? And certainly there can be anecdotal aspects of it, but if any hard data that you can also incorporate, it really does help in our case making. I see Shira has a comment. Shira, did you want to speak to that comment, or are you taking care of kids too, like Eric? So she says, I think there needs to be a class to help creatives to measure. So is anyone, yes, kids, she says. Anyone else agree that it would be helpful to have some toolkits work? Okay, well, that's something, I don't know if that's something the city is interested, Megan, in doing, but maybe it's something that or Californians for the Arts with Sarah could do.
Yeah,
I think
this
there's
is
so much opportunity here.
Yeah, I think this is something we've been talking about already. It's in Sarah, is how we can, what the next year's convenings will look like and what sorts of resources need to be offered. I actually, if I can grab the link for it and share it in the chat, I just took part in a panel last week, I think, and it was about the future of the MFA, but they were talking a lot about what is actually realistic to expect from artists. And, with all of the applications and the things that are going on right now, I think it's really highlighted, especially in COVID, there's this intense emergency need for resources from people that have suddenly lost all of their income, but they're not necessarily amazing marketers or writers or whatever, depending on what it is that they're doing. And in the old days, it was like, well, you were just terrible at writing a grant, so too bad. And now I kind of think, well, what kind of bridges could be built there to make that more possible, and make it efficient for them to be able to do that? And are we expecting a lot depending on what somebody's needing? So I think that's really interesting. And I also think, just to circle back to Donnie's comment for a minute, one of the things that I started thinking about last year when we were putting all the pieces together for Sarah, I think just the nature, and when I say like we need to tell our story better, we need to tell it differently, I think one of the things I mean by that is that, early on, I attended this conversation with Valley Vision, I think, and they were looking at what the future prosperity of the city would look like. And at no point were the arts mentioned, not once. And I think that was one of the first eye openers for me, was thinking, okay, we can't just say we really want you to include us, or we hope you'll include us, or let us tell you all the hard work we're doing or whatever, so that you think we're worthy. It's like, no, we're demanding a seat at that table, because we know that we have people coming to visit us that are eating in the restaurants that are paying into the regional Chamber of Commerce or Visit Sac or whatever. It's like, we're generating activity. We know it for a fact. So instead of being marginalized in this way that we're kind of these hopeless individuals that can't possibly do anything of value, it's like, I think all of us need to get better at just rejecting that, even absent of data, which we absolutely need. But I'm done with that conversation. It's pointless. It's not true. It's not real. And when we get back to normal life, whatever that looks like, we're going to be essential in pulling people out into the community again. Full stop.
I would say that one of the silver linings I've seen of this time period is that we are definitely more conversation than we've ever been before. And I think it's because people truly miss us. And they didn't realize how much they would miss the arts until it was truly gone. And it's gone, it's been gone in many forms, although many of you transitioned to online programming. But I think one of the questions I have for all of you is, what are other seats at the table that you could have within your community that are not just in the arts silo? so that when you're having these conversations, like I've met with Cal Travel, I've met with the Restaurants Association, I've been on panels, or thanks to Liv, I was on the panel on the future of work, things like that, where we're trying to get ourselves at the table with other types of industry, workforce development, as Megan talks about. Where else in your own community could you be showing up and not just saying, I'm here because I'm here for the arts, but because you're here and you want to then be incorporated into the conversation. So does anyone have any suggestions on that, things that they've worked, that they've done where they've seen that to be effective? Because it's shocking to me when I met with the tourism industry, when they sort of forgot that arts and culture were such a critical piece of tourism, and I had to remind them, or that we have to remind legislators that we're so underfunded. It's like, what? How many times do we have to say the same thing? So any suggestions
Actually,
on that?
Cal's, the Arts Leaders of Sacramento, which is the larger arts organizations, the leaders of that meet once a month. We met with the Restaurant Associate, or with the Visit Sacramento people. And that ended up in a one-page spread in their quarterly brochure that they put in all the hotels with everybody's venues, exhibits, plays, whatever. I don't think they published it in a while, but it was several months, about a year or so, we had a quarterly page right after we met with them. So those meetings can be productive in lots of ways.
That's great. And Shira has an excellent suggestion too, which I absolutely support, which is get more creative on economic development organizations, get more creatives on boards, artists, arts leaders on boards of other types of industries, housing, infrastructure, other areas that, development, you want to be at the table as much as possible. We're at this point, we're really just here to now have invite you into the conversation and to bring up what you want to talk about, you want us to know about, some of the maybe questions and some of the things that we have already discussed. Please just start talking or raise your hand or put something in the chat, but we want to hear from you. Yeah, Allison.
So I put in the chat about grant writing and thinking about, I talked to Lisa Cami at California Lawyers for the Arts, who I've done workshops for over the years, and they record them and they'll put them on YouTube. But I think a multi-sessions on how artists can translate their passion and their art form into narrative that is grant friendly, loans friendly, marketing friendly, and that it's not just specifically when, oh my gosh, there's a grant due in 2 weeks and I need how to learn how to write it. But to be able to have a portfolio out there ready that does have impact and outcomes, and a lot of those statistics that they can pull out at a moment's notice if they want to talk to an elected person or they have a marketing opportunity, but that becomes a part of their professional development. And CLA, I talked to Lisa about it, and they're interested in doing that. So, and that would be statewide.
Excellent. Well, Allison, let us know so we can amplify that out there. That sounds really great. And one of the things I just want to share is that when we did do that hearing where Marie and I spoke at the assembly hearing, one of our board members, Keisha, from the Museum of African American Art in Los Angeles, did, out of 18 presenters, she did her presentation to the legislature in the form of a poem that rhymed. And it was so powerful that it got tweeted out. New York Times picked it up. I mean, and one of the things, the light bulb moments that came out of that for me was that oftentimes we're asking artists and creatives to sound like government, versus saying, show up and sound and show why the arts matter using your practice versus using the words of policy. And, we often talk about why arts matter. Why? In fact, that's what my shirt says. But we don't actually, let's show why arts matter. And I'll be honest with you, let's talk about collective trauma that everyone's experiencing right now, from all the different crises that are in the world. I mean, for example, your congressional representatives and their staffers have gone through a lot of crises, specifically in terms of what happened with the insurrection
Right.
attempt and everything else. And I was thinking about, how do we utilize the arts to help them?
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
and what better way would we actually convince them to fund the arts if we actually use the arts to say we can help you right now while you're experiencing trauma.
So could state and federal grant applications be morphed to include more artistic expression and not just fill in the bubbles?
It's a great question. And in fact, something, you know, Marie, we were having that conversation today about how can we make funding more equitable? And part of it is, what is the process? I mean, not number one, who gets invited and who's part of, engaged in that way, but it's also the process is designed for a certain
Yes.
type of human.
Yeah.
And so we're definitely looking at that. And it's interesting because we're working with that on that $50 million for cultural institutions and being in a partner with Lendistry. And I don't think we'll have a tremendous amount of influence in terms of what that grant application looks like, but they're hearing more about what that looks like because they have never even had nonprofits, right? They're typically used to giving monies out to for-profit businesses. So,
and I just want to jump in there too, actually. I do think it's important. And I've not having been in government prior to this role, but being in advocacy and research and policy for a really long time, it's just been sort of fascinating to see those inner workings and like how that gets structured. But I do think it's legitimate to ask the question, do we need to be training people to work in these systems, or do we need to evaluate these systems and determine whether or not those systems are the things that we should be like, that are working, particularly when it comes to artists, because they are often under-resourced. And, for a long time, I've talked to folks where it's like, hey, listen, the burden of proof is on the investor to show the value of the investments. And so that's why, I saw, Marie put a comment in the chat, but, about, specifically what data we're collecting and how we're using it. I think there's a lot that can be put in context to help people, if we get the right information, can just explain, like, this is what's happening and this is why investments matter. And these are the best vehicles or the best tools for investment. Mm-hmm. So I think it's worth it for us to really, what do they say, challenge processes and practices, particularly when a lot of those systems, let's get real, have alienated a huge portion of the population from being able to get access to resources and are resulting in outcomes that are not equitable.
I also just want to point out though too, and I've noticed this with some of the applications that we solicit for programs at Verge, that there's also, what I've noticed in this community specifically, a need to support more artists in how they document their work and empower them to be able to do that themselves. So, I mean, I think that if it's a business application or something that's going to be tremendously difficult to navigate, then maybe there's a mentor program or something that helps with logistical stuff. But then I also think that we don't want artists to just be competitive in Sacramento. We want them to be competitive for grants outside of Sacramento, nationally, and to be able to apply for residencies and do other things. And so if they're not able to take images of their work or do things that they would be able to submit to something else, then we're not empowering somebody to be greater than this moment. And so I think it's a multifaceted approach in what it is that needs to get delivered. And there's probably multiple people that need to be at the table to make that happen.
I kind of wanted. Hi.
Justina wanted to say something.
Yeah. So I work with Live at Verge, and I also have my own consulting company, Art Tonic, where I help artists write grants, apply for grants and residencies. And I was also a mentor last year for the CARES Act grant. So I've talked to a lot of artists who've been in the process of writing grants. And something I've been thinking about lately, in addition to, maybe making the applications a little more artist friendly, I really think that a lot of artists need the opportunity to talk to other artists and talk to art professionals and people who work in the arts, because not everyone can afford that MFA degree to have, regular critiques and professors. And really, like, most of the artists and administrators I talked to that had difficulty with the grants, they just don't know how to explain what they're doing. And they just really need someone to talk it out with them and just ask them more questions. Like if they say, I use these colors because I was just attracted to them, they were just pretty to me. And then I say, well, like, what about those colors attracted you to them? And those are like the kinds of things you need to get to when you're explaining your work on a grant application. Because if a panel just reads, I use these colors because they're pretty, you know, that's not really enough. That's not diving deep enough. But many of these artists who don't have this formal academic training, they don't have that experience talking about their art. And I think as a city and as arts organizations in the city, and I hope, you know, I was just talking to Liv about this today, about developing a series of professional development workshops for our artists in lieu of like MFA work. I think that that's something else that we as art administrators in the city can provide to artists, is connections with other professionals and other artists, just opportunities to talk about your art and figure out what you're doing and why you're doing it and what your goals are.
Charlie?
Yes, I'd like to speak to that also. I want to first thank Allison and Justina and Michelle. If it wasn't for Michelle on a lot of things, I wouldn't have been able to write a grant myself. It was my first opportunity. First of all, we just lost our executive director over the summertime. And so I was thrust into this world. Now, I'm a great musician. I can write a song. I can do all that and teach a song and the whole 9 yards. I was thrust into the executive director position, and they said, write this grant. And I'm like freaking out. And it was because Michelle was able to walk me through some things and gave me the language, because I did not know. As Justina was saying, you have to sit there and talk an artist through it, because we know what we're doing. We get the results. It's just explaining it and pinning it on paper. So whatever you can do to help artists like me, or to come to the table, to get some of those dollars and to spread our message, is, I think, would be very beneficial. So I want to thank you all for that, really.
And I love that it's, I see, Michael, a twofer, where it's like, let's get this, you know, the professional development we need for artists and others to engage in the process. But I like what Megan said too, which is like, let's acknowledge that the process is also fundamentally broken, and we need to fix it so it's not so unattainable for so many people. So I think it's a both and. So thank you. Michael, did you want to join the conversation?
Yeah, I was just curious. You mentioned Senate Bill 805 that's dealing with AB5. Caught my ears. But you mentioned another one as well. Could you give us maybe an update on those two? I didn't quite.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly really early on in the process. Basically, all the bills had to be in by last Friday. There were over 2,000 bills that were submitted. A lot of them are kind of, yeah. And so basically our lobbyists are sitting just kind of going through so many bills, trying to figure out which are ones that are going to impact our sector, which also has to do like things with rent and mortgage relief and housing and all of the things that we know are critical for the survival of the creative sector. But there are two bills that have been introduced. Senator Rubio introduced Senate Bill 805, which is actually right now the language is around an exemption for performing arts organizations under $1.5 million. And then Assembly Member Levine, I think it's AB 1227, and that one is around workers in a production for theatrical production, something along those lines. I don't remember. They're sort of similar. Senator Rubio was the senator who got the exemption for newspaper last year at the same time as the cleanup bill that Lorena Gonzalez brought forward. So she's pretty tough at going up against the author, Lorena Gonzalez. Gonzalez did not introduce a bill this year, which means that she's sort of handing it off and saying to the legislature, you can do some of that now, the rest of the legislature. So we'll see, Michael. We have a meeting on Friday with Rubio and people who've brought it forward, and we'll keep everyone updated on what the language develops into, and also what you can do in terms of advocacy to support it if when the time is right.
Great, thanks so much, Julie.
Sure. Okay, well, we got like 10 more minutes. If anyone has other things they want to add to the conversation, maybe we can, let's see, is there anything in the chat, Matt, or any of the results from the survey? Oh, Amy
Yeah, I was wondering.
Andy Cunningham actually just raised his hand as I was about to jump in. So Andy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Hi. I was wondering if there are any developers on this site here, on these talks that happen, real estate developers who might be swayed in some respects to, utilize their space for arts and that type of thing. I know that Ali was a great advocate for the arts. And so I'm wondering if there's a push for more people to come to these types of meetings, because I feel that Sacramento moves through real estate. And if you can't get those people on board, they're not going to be open. The money channels are less open if they're not really on board. If you have things like Verge and Art Street and Art Hotel happening on a regular basis, that brings people from other communities to Sacramento and kind of moves those gears of like, hey, Sacramento's got things to do. And I just think that getting those people into these meetings would be beneficial.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I'll just jump in there because when in talking with a lot of folks, clearly, when we're looking at our work as a division, housing and creative space has just absolutely risen to the top for all sorts of reasons of urgency and the inflow and escalating housing costs. There's so much there that needs to be discussed. And you're absolutely right. Developers play a really significant role. And just one of the things that I've been thinking about on this front is, are there ways that we can identify who those arts-friendly developers are out there? Because they're definitely there. And I've heard names mentioned as I've had specific conversations, but wouldn't it be great, much like we have volunteer lawyers for the arts and we have, accountants for the arts that are supportive, what would it mean to really engage or embrace a group of people on a much more regular basis? Who are in a position to influence this issue exactly, and who could be deployed to really solve as problem solvers, but also to think, I just really want to put this out there, and I've seen this with artists and neighborhoods year in, year out, since I've been doing this work. It's almost 20 years at this point. Artists are contributors in neighborhoods. They activate spaces, and then often others extract their value that is being created, and then those artists and the neighbors that they're with often get pushed out. And that is just a dynamic that needs to be addressed. And one of the ways we can do that is by thinking about community wealth building and the work that's coming out of the Center for Cultural Innovation, the work out of the Sustainable Economies Law Center in Oakland. There are models here that can be deployed to do that. And I think if we could have, powerful relationships between developers and also the arts community, and really open up capital and create ways that aren't just about, that are actually allowing creatives to build wealth and to own in places and really contribute in their neighborhoods in more significant ways, that would be amazing. So I think those are all the things that we should be thinking about.
Yeah, well, I kind of think that what it ends up doing is it kind of like it moves the money out of this sort of like super slow bureaucratic government thing and goes basically to the source. That might facilitate things on a quicker basis as opposed to having to like line up and wait for money and SB this and whatever. It just goes straight to the source.
Yeah, I mean, Andy, I agree. I think it's both and. You want statute and legislation that supports these types of, and zoning regulations and all this sort of stuff. So you got to work within the system as well as outside the system, and together you can get there. I agree with that. Donnie, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I do. Just to piggyback on what Andy just said and Megan just said, we are blessed actually in Sacramento with a bunch of developers who are really arts oriented and who, like McKinley Village, for example, has a whole sculpture garden in the middle of it. and a light sculpture in the tunnel on the way in. The artists all over the place are doing work in different developments. I actually know a bunch of them through my leadership connections. And Megan, I'd love to work with you on putting a group together to talk about that, because I'd love to see us invite 2 or 3 developers to the next regional forum that you have, because I do believe that they are a sort of easier, quicker access, and they tend to be creative people themselves, right? So, I mean, you know, you got Colacatronis, you've got Friedman, you got all kinds of developers in this town who are very arts oriented. So yeah, absolutely.
So we about 5 minutes left, and I'm watching the chat, and I'm just watching all these amazing collaborations happening in the chat. So great. I also wanted to acknowledge that you guys win so far in terms of how many people contacted your elected officials. I think that you're 80% out of, so only 20% have not. So I think our average has been more like 40%. So good work, Sacramento. And yet one would hope that since you're in the capital, that would be the case, but not always. So good work. And for those who don't know yet how to, seriously or whatever, raise your voice for the arts in that way, you have lots of mentors here in your community, and it sounds like now you're going to actually have some professional development also around that, as well as grant writing that came out of all of this. So good 90-minute work session. I think that we got to some good conclusions, but I want to, Liv, do you have something you want to add in terms of final notes?
I would just say go to the Arts for Sac website, become a member, stay in touch with us, and we'll send out information about our next convening in March. And some of the conversations that we're having around professional development and mentoring and things, we already did a project at the end of last year where we helped a group of regional organizations with a sustainability plan that was funded by the CARES Act. So I'm sure that we're going to be embarking on more of that as we get grant funding. So I just hope we attract more members and people stay in touch.
Awesome. Marie? Nope, unmute. There's got to be somebody.
Hey, I just wanted to close with some thank yous from me to Richard Falcon from the Teatro Nahual, who is my partner on the Artist Corps. I just want to say that there were some questions about the panel, and I can't say they didn't have cause, but the concern was that it was such a big budget for an organization that had a smaller budget than what we were asking for, and every single penny was accounted for. I think there's this idea that, if you're a small budget, how could you possibly manage a large chunk of money? But we did, and people of color, and we did. And it just went off without a glitch. It was fantastic. Thank you, Richard Falcon. I want to say thank you to Victoria Hamilton, who's on this call. She's the director. She's the president of Californians for the Arts, California Arts Advocates. She's someone I've known for 30 years. We were 14 when we started, right? And Julie and Matt and Alyssa Jade. Folks, if you're not members of Californians for the Arts, become a member. It doesn't cost a lot. You get so much for it, and we become stronger. So Liv, I want to thank you for taking the lead on this, and everyone who's here. I just admire everyone here so much. Michelle, I'm so sorry we haven't talked in ages, but folks, let's just keep together. We keep together, we are powerful.
Awesome.
Good to meet you, Megan.
It was great to hear from all of you, and we'll continue these conversations as we move forward. And I wanted to also acknowledge Andrew Kehoe, who is here from the Office of the Mayor, who is his arts portfolio. He said he has his baby on his lap, being very talkative, so he didn't join us in conversation today, but he did put his contact information in there. You have a very friendly arts mayor, so utilize that connection with Andrew, whose information's in the chat. I want to also just throw in my information in the chat, if Matt, you wouldn't mind. I want to definitely be available for people if they have questions about what's particularly happening at the state level or what policies we're working on, or how you can engage more in advocacy. And just quickly note that April is Arts, Culture, and Creativity Month in the state of California. It was a Senate concurrent resolution 2 years ago. It is our time to claim our space. So join us in doing that throughout the month of April. We will give you easy tools to engage with us. And we will do an advocacy week as well, where you can meet with your state elected officials, and we'll give you some talking points. We'll make it as painless as possible for you. Painful. Demystify it. And I really, really encourage you, if you've never ever, which is only a handful of you, not done advocacy, just, pick up the phone, call Eric. If anything, give him a call and just say thanks for being an arts advocate and learn more from him. But congratulations, Sacramento. You guys do a great job. Congratulations on creating a regional advocacy organization. It's such a big first step for really getting that into a whole nother aspect of work. And welcome, Megan. We're so excited you're here to work with you. So many great things that you had to add today that I think really enlightened so much of the conversation. So thanks, everybody, and stay safe. And please do reach out to us if you need any more support or have any more comments to add. Thank you so much.